In this section, we're going to continue working on our search bar component. First things first, however, we're going to make sure that we hook up the semantic UI CSS library to our project. So we're going to go through the same series of steps that we've gone through many times so far. Inside of our public directory, we can find that index.html file. We're going to add a link tag to this thing that links to the semantic UI CSS file. First, we need to find a link to it. So inside of a new browser tab, I can search for semantic UI CDN. I'll find cdnjs.com. And then once here, we can search for semantic.min. And I'll find down here semantic.min.css. I can then copy that link, flip back over, add a new link tag with the rel of style sheet, and I'll put in my href like so, and close that tag off. All right. Now if I flip back over, I'll see that new font kick in, indicating that I did just successfully load up that style sheet. All right, so now we can flip back over to our search bar component. Inside this video, we're going to start to focus on making sure that this thing at least shows a form element and maybe a label and a text input. I'm going to first begin by expanding this thing's render method. So I'm going to put in a set of parentheses like so. I'll place my div, and I'm going to give this thing a class name of UI segment. Remember, this is just going to draw kind of a nice rectangle around everything inside of here. And then this component is also going to eventually need a little bit of custom styling. So I'm going to also give it a class name of search bar, like so that we can eventually come back inside of here and add a little bit of custom styling that I know that it's going to need. Then inside of here, I'll put a form element with a class name of UI form. Inside of there, I'll place a div with the class name of field. And then I'll place my label. This time I'm going to give it a label of video search, because that's what we're searching for this time. We're searching for some YouTube videos or whatnot. And then after the label, we can put a input. I'm going to mark this as type text. And we'll save this and just make sure that everything shows up correctly and is at least somewhat nicely styled. So I'll flip back over. Now, of course, I'm very far zoomed in. If I go back out to 1%, I see, yep, it looks like we got our nice text input up here, and I can type in it as usual. Now you'll notice that the search bar extends all the way from the left to the right. And usually we like to have a little bit of a gutter or kind of a margin on the left and right-hand sides of the page. So to add in that little gutter of sorts, I'm going to flip back over to my app component. I'm going to find that root level div inside there, and then I can put on a class name of UI container. And now if I go back over, you'll see that the UI container just puts on a little margin on the left and right hand sides. All right, so that's cool. I'll now go back over to my search bar. So the next thing I want to do is turn this input right here from a uncontrolled input to a controlled input. Remember, the idea behind this, in effect, is that we're going to hook it up to the state of our search bar class. In practice, the reason that we are doing this is so that we can make sure that we are storing our data for the search term inside the component and not inside the DOM. So to get started, I'll first initialize the state object at the top of my class by saying term is empty string like so. Remember, we can use any name for this property that we wish. Term is short for search term, but it could just as easily been like text or my input or whatever you want it to be. So then on the input itself, we're going to tell the input that its value is going to come from this.state.term. Now, something that I want to show you very quickly that's just a little bit fun that I didn't show you on the last application when we put it together. We have not yet wired up an event handler to the input. We've only told it, hey, here's what your value should be. Now really quickly, I want you to try putting in some default text up here at the state initialization. And then after you do so, flip back over, and you'll see, of course, that default text appear inside of that text input right there. You'll also notice that there's a big warning down there. Just ignore that warning for just a second. So now here's the interesting thing. Select inside this text input, and then try typing. And you'll see that you can't type at all. So that's the impact, or kind of the output of assigning a value to an input element, but not wiring up a onChange event handler. If you do not allow the input to change by allowing it to tell us that some user has typed in a new input, update our state, and get the input to re-render, its input value right here is going to be completely fixed, and there's no way that we can change it. If you actually look at the warning down there inside of your Chrome console or browser console, you'll notice that it actually specifically says that we wired up a value property, but not a onChange handler. And so that's going to show that text input as read-only mode. So just an interesting little thing. All right, let's go ahead and wire up our onChange event handler. I'll first begin by giving myself a little bit more space on the input tag. And then I'll add on an onChange prop. Remember, the name onChange here is very special. If we pass a callback handler to the onChange prop right here, it's going to be called anytime that the input gets changed. If we name this anything else, like tell me when changed, our callback function will not be invoked because the onChange handler is a very special name. All right, so I'm going to pass this thing a callback method that we're going to eventually create as a callback on the search bar class that I will call about this dot on input change. And then I can immediately define that as a method on the class. So I'll say on input change. And I know that this is going to be a event callback, so I'm going to make sure I define it as an arrow function like so. All right, let's take a quick pause right here. When we come back to the next section, we'll make sure that we make use of this event.